Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a monumental career, throwing the source material onto the table, and trying to figure out exactly how all the puzzle pieces fit together.
Yeah.
We are charting the truly astounding and I think often wildly paradoxical career of one of the most prolific and intellectually rigorous documentary filmmakers working today. Elizabeth Freya Garbus, better known to the world as Liz Garbus.
And she is quite something. We are dealing with a director and producer born in 1970 who has spent, over 2 decades now, operating at the absolute cutting edge of her field. For sure, we actually look at her full filmography. It's not just long. It's like a masterclass in intellectual curiosity matched with this ability to secure truly unprecedented access. It's kind of staggering.
That tension you mentioned, that's exactly our mission today. We are tracking how a director who was nominated for an Academy Award for documenting the horrors inside the Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola, back in the late 90s.
Yeah, The Farm. Incredible film.
Ends up, 24 years later, directing a 6-episode global blockbuster series about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. It feels like the ultimate high-low career trajectory, doesn't it?
It really does. And we're working exclusively today from a detailed academic and biographical profile. So we're charting her educational background, that massive filmography, and, that staggering awards shelf. Our job really is to connect the dots between that niche, hard-hitting social justice work, like, dissecting the American prison system,
Right.
to directing these iconic figure studies, like What Happened, Miss Simone, and then those huge visibility projects you just mentioned, like Harry and Meghan.
So our goal for you, the listener, is to uncover the consistent thematic threads woven through this huge body of work. We want to provide the context behind her 3 Oscar nominations, those multiple Emmy wins, and, the founding of 2 major production companies.
Yeah.
How did she manage to maintain such depth while achieving such, massive commercial scope? That's what we need to try and figure out.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Makes sense to start right at the very beginning, I think. Yeah, to understand the kind of films Garbus makes, you almost have to look at her roots first. She's a native New Yorker, grew up in the city, and her family background, it practically reads like the foundational mission statement for her whole career.
Yeah.
It's all focused on justice and societal critique.
I was really struck by the specificity in the source material about her parents' professions. It wasn't just, intellectuals or lawyers. It was very specific.
That's exactly right. Her father, Martin Garbus, is an incredibly prominent civil rights attorney, really well known.
Okay.
Her mother, Ruth Martin Garbus, is a writer, therapist, and social worker. And the profile also notes her family is Jewish, which often underscores a tradition of engagement with social justice issues.
Right.
So when you put that combination together, civil rights law, psychotherapy, and social work, it just instantly provides this thematic foundation for pretty much her entire body of work, doesn't it?
It really does. So she's not just documenting for the sake of documenting. She's coming at it with a commitment to systemic justice, right? And an ability to analyze complex social structures. And crucially, this imperative to create these deep, really sensitive psychological profiles of her subjects. It's like her DNA is literally encoded with the idea of fighting for civil liberties and understanding the human psyche.
Yeah, it provides the essential emotional and intellectual grounding. You see it again and again.
Yeah.
She's never just documenting a system in the abstract. She's always looking at the human cost within that system.
Right.
And she comes from a family where fighting for civil liberties was quite literally the day job.
Okay, but let's pause on that grounding for a moment and look at the academic blueprint she built for herself. Because this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Okay.
She graduated magna cum laude from Brown University in 1992. Which is impressive in itself. But her degree wasn't straightforward. She actually double majored in history and semiotics.
History and semiotics. Now that is a serious intellectual foundation for anyone, but maybe especially for a documentary filmmaker.
How so?
Well, history gives you the context, right? The timeline, the understanding of how power structures and institutions evolved over time. That's absolutely essential if you're going to scrutinize something like the prison system or later a massive news organization like the New York Times.
Okay, that makes sense. But semiotics, that feels like the less common element here. For listeners who might not be familiar, what does that bring to her filmmaking specifically?
Right. Semiotics, in simple terms, the study of signs and symbols. It's really the analysis of how meaning is created and communicated in culture.
Ah, okay.
Think of it as decoding the visual language all around us. So for a documentarian who spends her life dissecting public narratives, iconography, and the symbols of power or fame, well, this is probably the most critical tool she possesses.
So she's not just telling the story of, say, Nina Simone or Marilyn Monroe. She's analyzing the cultural symbols those figures became. And then actively dismantling those symbols to reveal maybe the more complex human being underneath. She's analyzing how the story is perceived and what its symbols mean to the wider culture, whether those symbols are like a prison uniform or a royal crown.
Precisely. And the connection to her future subjects gets even clearer when you look at the title of her final thesis at Brown. Get this: Feminine Transgression, Historicizing Desire and Subversion in Contemporary France.
Wow. Okay.
So that early interest in history, gender, desire, and especially subversion, that's the exact intellectual lens you see her apply later when examining figures like Nina Simone, who constantly subverted expectations.
Right.
Or Marilyn Monroe, who was so tragically defined by public desire and, well, the subversion of her own intellectual life.
And here's a key detail, though, from the source material. While she was pursuing these really rigorous theoretical subjects, history and semiotics, she also made sure to take classes in video production.
Ah, interesting.
So she was building the academic muscle alongside the practical, technical know-how. That signals very early on, doesn't it, that this synthesis of deep theoretical thought and visual storytelling was always her intended path. It wasn't just an accident.
No, absolutely not. Planned from the start, it seems, #2, launching the documentary career an early success. And the transition from Brown to the professional world was incredibly fast. Almost immediately, she positioned in the major leagues of documentary filmmaking.
And she actually started even before college was over, apparently. The source material notes she made a documentary about students' last day of school while she was still in high school.
Huh.
Early start.
Yeah. And then post-college, her path was sort of the classic Hollywood apprenticeship, right? She interned at Miramax.
Which was the indie power player back then.
Totally. And then she landed a crucial job working for the filmmaker Jonathan Stack.
And that collaboration with Stack led directly to her professional breakthrough, The Farm, Angola, USA.
This film, released in 1998, focused on the notorious Louisiana State Penitentiary. And to fully appreciate this film's significance, you kind of have to understand Angola. It's massive, built on a former slaves plantation.
Wow.
Often called the Alcatraz of the South, and historically just notorious for its conditions and the sheer number of inmates serving life sentences. Little hope of release for many.
So for a young director, her first major film, securing that level of embedded access inside one of the most guarded and historically, frankly, violent state prisons in the U.S., that's just unprecedented, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's a massive ethical and investigative undertaking for a debut feature.
Huge. And it clearly paid off.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Major recognition. Was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 1999. It won the Sundance Grand Jury Prize. It actually tied with that polarizing film Frat House.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And it secured 2 Emmy Awards. I mean, that is an enormous launch pad for a young director.
Absolutely.
To debut with a film of that intense social and political weight and have it immediately validated by the Academy, Sundance, and the Emmys, well, that really set the tone for the level of investigative quality her name would represent for the next 2 decades.
And crucially, that same year, 1998, she co-founded her first independent production company, Moxie Firecracker Films.
Right, with Rory Kennedy, who, interestingly, was a fellow Brown University alumna.
Ah, okay. The Brown connection again.
That partnership is really significant and proved long-lasting. It marked a definitive commitment to producing politically engaged, independent documentaries. And the name itself is a fun historical footnote, apparently.
Oh.
Yeah, it was derived from combining the names of their previous separate companies. Kennedy's was called Moxie, and Garbus's was Firecracker, so Moxie Firecracker.
Huh. Okay, that makes sense. And Moxie Firecracker became a real powerhouse for social impact, didn't it?
Definitely. For instance, the executive produced Street Fight in 2005. That chronicled the extremely dramatic 2002 Newark mayoral election.
Cory Booker's race, yeah.
That's the one. And it secured its own Academy Award nomination. So right there, it shows a commitment to documenting electoral politics and systemic urban power struggles.
But they also crossed over into cultural documentaries, right?
Yeah, like producing Yo Soy Boricua, Pa Que Tu Lo Sepas.
Yeah.
In 2006, working alongside the actress Rosie Perez.
Okay.
And Garbus even co-directed The Changing Face of Beauty with Rory Kennedy way back in 2000. Which addressed issues of representation and societal beauty standards.
And that whole era, for Garbus personally, kind of culminated with her second Academy Award nomination, didn't it?
Yes, exactly. She produced the documentary short film Killing in the Name in 2010, again with Rory Kennedy. That detailed the story of a man whose brother was murdered by al-Qaeda.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, and it solidified her status not just as a director, but also as a producer, with a really keen eye for exceptional socially relevant material across different lengths and formats. It demonstrated her commitment, really, to the victims of both state violence, like in The Farm, and extremist violence, #Day3, thematic pillars of Garbus's filmography.
Okay, so this is where the analysis of the source material gets really vital, I think. When you look at the, 40-plus credits she's amassed, her work isn't scattered or random at all.
No, not at all.
It feels highly structured around those core intellectual pillars we talked about earlier, the ones that seem to inform every subject she chooses, whether it's the prison system or, a cultural icon.
Absolutely. And the first pillar, the one that really defined her early success and critical reputation, has to be justice, incarceration, and civil liberties.
Yeah.
#A, justice, incarceration, and civil liberties.
Totally.
Garbus consistently examines society's edges, and particularly system failures. After the big systemic critique in The Farm, she immediately drilled down into the individual human consequence of that system with the execution of Wanda Jean in 2002.
Right, I remember that one.
It was shown at Sundance, continuing that really difficult theme of capital punishment and the agonizing, drawn-out process of the death penalty. Very human focus.
But she didn't stay solely focused on domestic U.S. issues, did she? We see her broadening the scope pretty significantly, internationally and geopolitically, with Ghosts of Abu Ghraib in 2007.
Yeah, that was a big one. That film premiered at Sundance and won an Emmy for Outstanding Nonfiction Special that year. And the subject matter itself represents a huge strategic and, frankly, ethical shift for her.
How so?
Well, she moves from the domestic horrors of a state prison like Angola to documenting the documented human rights abuses during wartime at a U.S.-run facility in Iraq.
Right. A whole different scale.
Exactly. Securing the footage and, crucially, the interviews necessary to make that film. That was a major journalistic undertaking, holding institutional power accountable, but now on a global scale.
And her focus on civil rights wasn't just about prisons or war either. In 2009, she premiered Shouting Fire, Stories from the Edge of Free Speech at Sundance. This one explicitly explored the limits and the complexities of the First Amendment. It really shows her dedication to civil liberties from a strictly constitutional perspective, which seems to reflect that influence from her civil rights attorney father we discussed.
It absolutely does. And if we connect this thread right through to more recent times, even a decade later, she returned to that constitutional theme, but applied it directly to contemporary U.S. politics.
You mean All In?
Exactly. In 2020, she released All In, The Fight for Democracy, a major political focus on voting rights in the U.S.
And it featured some big names.
Yeah, key figures like Stacey Abrams, Eric Holder, and Marcia Fudge. It was scrutinizing the very infrastructure of American democracy itself. So this shows a continuous, 20-year commitment to constitutional scrutiny right from The Farm through to All In.
That's a really clear through line. Which brings us neatly to her second major pillar, the use of film to dismantle and reveal the inner lives of these celebrated yet often very complicated individuals. #B, deep psychological profiles of iconic figures.
Yes, and Garbus is just brilliant at this, revealing the complexity and often the dark reality hidden behind a massive public persona. This is where her history and semiotics background really seems to pay off.
Right.
She's not just documenting, she's dissecting the public meaning versus the private reality of fame. It's that semiotics lens again.
Her 2011 film, Bobby Fischer Against the World, feels like a perfect example of this deep dive psychological approach. It chronicled the famous 1972 Cold War chess showdown between Fischer and Boris Spassky.
Yeah.
But the real power of the film comes from detailing the psychological descent of Fischer himself, right? How he became paranoid and eventually retreated into isolation.
Absolutely. And that film was so respected that it was given the signal honor of opening the premiere documentary section of the Sundance Film Festival.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a slot specifically reserved for master American documentary filmmakers. It really demonstrated her ability to take a potentially niche subject, chess, and turn it into this profound study of genius, instability, and Cold War paranoia.
She followed that up with Love, Marilyn in 2012. And this film is fascinating because it feels like a direct application of that semiotic analysis through the documentary form itself.
Exactly. Marilyn Monroe is perhaps the most iconic, most symbolized female star of the 20th century, right?
Arguably, yeah.
So Garbus needed a way to shatter that symbol, to get past the image. So instead of relying on the traditional talking heads and, glossy archive clips, the film uniquely used notable A-list actors.
Yeah, the list is incredible.
It is. We're talking Glenn Close, Viola Davis, Lindsay Lohan, Uma Thurman, Evan Rachel Wood, reading directly from Marilyn Monroe's previously unseen private writings. Diaries, letters.
That choice is revolutionary, really. You're using contemporary symbols of fame, the actors, to channel the private, unsanitized voice of the original icon.
Yeah.
It feels like an act of documentary subversion, allowing the subject to finally define herself rather than letting the public image continue to define her even after death.
It proves she's always looking for innovative ways to access and portray celebrity vulnerability. But I think the apex of this pillar, certainly in terms of impact, came in 2015 with the immense success of What Happened, Miss Simone for Netflix, about the singer Nina Simone.
Oh, Miss Simone was just a critical and awards juggernaut, wasn't it?
Totally. It was selected as the opening night film for Sundance that year. It earned her third Academy Award nomination for Best Documentary Feature, got a Grammy nomination for Best Music Film.
Wow.
And crucial wins, including a Peabody Award and an Emmy Award for Outstanding Documentary. She even got a DGA nomination for directing. Just huge recognition.
And the genius of the film, I think, lies in the intersectionality of its subject. Simone wasn't just one thing.
Not at all. She's a cultural genius, a committed civil rights activist, and a woman grappling with severe mental illness, later diagnosed as bipolar disorder.
Right.
And Garbus connects these threads flawlessly. She shows how Simone's artistic genius, the intense political pressure of the 1960s, and her internal struggles were just inextricably linked. You couldn't separate them.
It really solidified Garbus as one of the very few directors who can successfully bridge that kind of investigative journalism with profound musical and cultural biography.
Yeah, absolutely. And she applied that same rigorous psychological and archival approach later to becoming Cousteau in 2021 for National Geographic documentary films.
Right, Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah, proving she can apply this methodology to subjects across science, culture, sports, really any iconic figure whose public life might have masked a complex private journey. #C, systemic exploration and institutional access.
Okay, so her final pillar seems to be defined by one key thing: access. Garbus is exceptional at gaining entry to complex, often hidden institutions, whether they're historical, medical, or national newsrooms. This is where she really shows her tenacity, I think.
Definitely. Starting with history, she directed The Nazi Officer's Wife back in 2003, narrated by Susan Sarandon and Julia Ormond.
Okay.
That's an institutional look at war, complicity, and the hidden lives of those involved in systemic evil, getting inside that history.
She then shifted pretty seamlessly to the U.S. healthcare system with Coma in 2007, which aired on HBO.
Right. That film followed 4 brain-injured patients and their complex, often difficult treatment at the JFK Johnson Medical Facility in New Jersey.
And again, it's about access. She's not just interviewing doctors in an office somewhere. She's embedded with the patients, navigating the day-to-day reality, the chaos of the system, capturing that raw vulnerability.
And taking that concept of being thoroughly embedded to heart, in 2014, she directed and produced A Good Job, Stories of the FDNY.
Ah, yes, the firefighters film.
Yeah, providing firsthand accounts of veteran firefighters. But crucially, the interviews were conducted by former FDNY member, the actor Steve Buscemi.
The use of Buscemi is just a stroke of brilliance in terms of gaining genuine access, isn't it?
Totally.
By using a figure who has that intimate, authentic connection to the subject, a former first responder himself, she gains a level of trust and depth that a traditional journalist maybe just couldn't achieve.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about her commitment to credible insider access, finding the right way in.
And she kept scrutinizing healthcare and crisis situations with a dangerous son in 2018.
Right, which explored 3 families struggling with the severe mental illness of their children and, frankly, the chaos of navigating the fragmented U.S. healthcare system trying to get help.
Right.
This constant return to systemic failure is a direct lineage from her early work on Angola, you see.
Yeah, you can trace it right back. But the apex of her access pillar, perhaps the most journalistically daring, has to be the Fourth Estate in 2018.
Oh, absolutely. The New York Times granted Garbus and her documentary crew what the source material calls unprecedented access.
Which meant what, exactly?
He says they were essentially living in the newsroom since Inauguration Day to cover the Trump administration, the Russian investigation, and related events. Just embedded.
Wow. That full, intimate access to a massive news institution during such a high-stakes, politically charged moment, that's almost unheard of in documentary filmmaking.
It really is. It demonstrates that if you want to understand how a specific, powerful system operates under extreme pressure, Liz Garbus is the filmmaker who can somehow secure the key, whether it's to the executive suite, the interrogation room, the hospital ward, or, the war room of a major newspaper.
Okay, so if the first era of Garbus's career was defined by Moxie Firecracker Films and its focus on, let's say, deep investigative journalism and the film festival circuit,
Right.
the current era feels defined by a new production powerhouse and a strategic pivot towards streaming series.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We've moved into the story syndicate era. Garbus is the co-founder and co-director of this new New York City-based documentary film production company.
And this feels like a strategic move built for scale. She co-directs the company with her husband, film producer Dan Kogan. The source also notes they have 2 children, Amelia and Theodore.
Right. And the formation of Story Syndicate and its subsequent output are, I think, a direct reflection of how the documentary landscape itself changed dramatically with the rise of streaming platforms like Netflix, HBO, Showtime, etc.
How so?
Well, to command large budgets and attract really large global audiences, the dominant model shifted, didn't it? From single-feature film narratives, often seen in festivals or limited release, to these multi-part high-production value series that people can binge-watch.
So the scale and focus of Story Syndicate seem to demonstrate this adaptation perfectly. Her work is increasingly focused on the multi-part documentary series, catering directly to that massive appetite on streaming services for, well, true crime and high-stakes celebrity features.
Yeah, you definitely see a clear, perhaps more commercial true crime vein running through this new company's output. But importantly, it's handled with her usual investigative rigor.
Like what?
Well, she directed the 6-episode series I'll Be Gone in the Dark in 2020 about the hunt for the Golden State Killer, based on Michelle McNamara's book.
Oh, that was huge.
Yeah. And the 2-part documentary, Who Killed Garrett Phillips, back in 2019.
And looking ahead, her slate seems clearly tailored for that streaming audience's genre requirements, doesn't it? The source lists, last call. When a serial killer stalked queer New York from 2023, an upcoming series like Gone Girls, The Long Island Serial Killer for 2025, and One Night in Idaho, The College Murders, also for 2025.
Right. So this shows a perhaps necessary adaptation translating her rigorous investigative style and her long-standing focus on systemic breakdown into the true crime format, which is arguably the dominant commercial language for documentary on these platforms today.
But the project that best exemplifies her capacity to handle extremely high-profile, incredibly sensitive subjects in this new globalized streaming era is absolutely Harry and Meghan.
Oh, without a doubt. The 2022 6-episode documentary series for Netflix revolving around Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
This wasn't just a biographical film, was it? It felt more like a piece of global diplomacy, or at least a major global media event.
Yeah.
And it must have required a level of trust that maybe only Garbus could command at this point.
I think that's right. To go from documenting the psychological decline of Bobby Fischer or the inmates at Angola to securing the cooperation of 2 living, breathing, highly controversial members of the British royal family.
Right.
That's a towering testament to the credibility she must have built over those 2 decades.
It really speaks to her ability to gain the trust of subjects who are inherently wary of media exposure, right? And who are constantly at the center of intense public scrutiny.
Yeah, maybe she refined that ability dealing with the deeply marginalized, like in The Farm, or the tragically famous, like Marilyn or Nina Simone. The fact that Harry and Meghan chose her it suggests they recognized her focus wouldn't just be on scandal for scandal's sake.
But on what?
Perhaps on the psychological reality of living within an institution, the monarchy, which is, a perfect reflection of that history and semiotics foundation we talked about. She's documenting monarchy as a system, in a way, just as she documented the New York Times as a system, or the prison as a system.
Huh. That's a fascinating connection. So it's a huge pivot in terms of profile, but maybe one that is still firmly built on her original pillars, deep psychological profiling and unprecedented institutional access.
I think that's a very strong argument, yeah. #TAG-V, accolades, ethics, and legacy.
Okay, let's just step back for a second and look at the cumulative effect of this career. We're talking about sustained, high-level recognition across more than 2 decades. That's almost unheard of in this medium, isn't it?
It really is. We're talking about an elite club of filmmakers here. 3 Academy Award nominations across 3 different decades. The Farm for Feature in the 90s, Killing in the Name for Short in the 2010s, and What Happened to Miss Simone for feature in the 2010s as well. That shows incredible longevity and consistent quality.
And that's matched by the Emmy wins, too. Outstanding nonfiction special wins for The Farm, Ghosts of Abu Ghraib, and What Happened, Miss Simone, plus that Sundance Grand Jury Prize way back in 1998 for The Farm. This continuous stream of recognition just confirms she operates at a caliber reserved for, master documentary storytellers.
Absolutely. But what is perhaps even more telling about her core values, maybe, is her recognition outside of the film world itself. The source mentions she is a fellow of the Open Society's Center on Crime, Communities, and Culture.
Right, and that foundation is inherently focused on justice and societal reform, not just Hollywood glamour or awards.
Precisely. That Open Society Fellowship connects back perfectly to the original mission, maybe implied, from her parents' work. It confirms that the thematic core of her work, justice, is recognized and valued by institutions dedicated to those very causes.
What's also fascinating, and noted in the source, is that her commitment to ethics is actively documented in her written work as well. It's not just in the films.
Yeah. Beyond her filmmaking, Garbus contributed to the academic discussion on the documentary process. Specifically, she wrote Chapter 18, Prisons, in a 2015 book called Adventures in the Lives of Others: Ethical Dilemmas in Factual Filmmaking.
Now, this feels like a crucial detail for understanding her legacy. Here's an award-winning director who achieved massive commercial success with Miss Simone around that time.
Yeah.
Yet she took the time to contribute to a serious academic discussion specifically about the ethics of filming in prisons, going back to her roots.
It's a powerful validation of her intellectual consistency, isn't it? She didn't just make The Farm and move on from Angola. Her decision to write specifically about the ethical burden of documenting incarcerated and vulnerable populations. Well, it underscores how her initial subject area continues to drive her critical thinking about the medium itself.
And the responsibility documentary makers bear when they seek that kind of deep access.
Exactly. It grounds her legacy entirely, I think. She's not just a commercial success or an award winner. She's clearly an intellectual force who has helped shape the way people talk about the ethical boundaries and the rigor required for deep access filmmaking.
So putting it all together.
Well, she is a director who took this grounding in civil rights, history, and semiotics and leveraged that combination into a career defined by two key things, really. Absolute mastery of the deep dive psychological profile and this almost unmatched ability to gain institutional access. Whether that institution is Angola prison, the New York Times newsroom, or, the gilded walls of the British royal family, it really is the definition of a career trajectory where the intellectual rigor remained constant, even as the platforms, the budgets, and the profiles of her subjects scaled exponentially upwards. Hashtag tag outro.
And there we have it. The career of Liz Garbus, charted. We've tracked her from a brown student fascinated by semiotics and the idea of feminine transgression, all the way to a director equally comfortable examining the horrors of Abu Ghraib as she is directing, the most anticipated royal series of the decade.
Yeah.
Her career seems defined by depth, by rigorous access, and this incredible ability to make seemingly dense or difficult topics immediately compelling.
And we've seen that transition, haven't we?
Yeah.
From co-founding the explicitly justice-focused Moxie firecracker films
Right.
to co-directing the massive powerhouse that is Story Syndicate, where she is now, yes, equally embracing high-profile celebrity access and the popular true crime genre. She adapted her methodology, clearly, but maybe never her underlying commitment to revealing the systems and the psychological complexity beneath the public surface.
And this raises an important question, I think, for you, the listener, as you consider the evolution of the documentary form itself. Garbus proves that you can move seemingly seamlessly between systemic critique and high-stakes commercial celebrity content. So, does this shift toward high-stakes, highly commercial series like Harry and Meghan alongside that heavy slate of true crime projects, does it reflect a necessary evolution dictated by the massive new streaming platforms like Netflix and HBO, platforms that demand scale and genre alignment?
Or maybe conversely, does it suggest that even the most dedicated investigative filmmakers must adapt their subject matter to the dominant appetite for celebrity and true crime content today, just to maintain that high level of production, funding, and access required to make any kind of deep dive film anymore?
Right. What does this mean for the future of the deep dive documentary itself? Will all essential investigative work eventually have to be packaged as either a crime procedural or a celebrity tell-all just to reach a global audience?
That's a big question.
Something to think about maybe as you watch her next series. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next time.